Joshua. We finished the book of Revelation in our afternoon study on Wednesday. What a joy. Who would have thought it would be a joy, right? And Miriam asked, what is Revelation? What is the main theme? And hope. Hope. The Revelation was to be read aloud. Why? And I said, why is Revelation a book that so many are terrified to read? It's apocalyptic, it's scary. How could it possibly be a book of hope? And we said, because of the skeleton, I call it the skeleton that's on the board in our fellowship room, is about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and how God, by his will, creates Israel, the nation. God created it. Man didn't create it. God created the nation of Israel. If man had anything to do with it, it wouldn't have been created. It was created by the will of God, so that God could demonstrate his righteousness, give them the law, bring people through, carry the seed line to the Christ, coronate Jesus as the Christ, and then usher in the church age, as I call it, the church age. And why is Revelation a book of hope? The same reason why the Old Testament is a book of hope, because God, who called Abraham, said, you're going to be in Egypt and I'm going to rescue you out of Egypt in 400 years. He tells man before it happens so that you can trust him. So when it plays out, we have this history. Everyone who reads the Bible, who starts at the beginning of the Bible, has the same effect the first time you're reading through God's story, the wondrous story. Why the drama? Why the drama? Why not just speak to us, God? Why not just make it known? And I challenge, there he is. I challenge Ron, right? Another, it's like, I always say, anything that you would ask God, if you would just do this, then I would know. When you read his word, he did it. And more than I would know. So why is Revelation a book of hope? Because God tells us beforehand what's going to happen. He tells us about this great persecution, and it's an answer to a prophecy from Daniel about the 4 kingdoms, that Christ was going to come in the 4th kingdom. And Jesus gives the revelation to John before Domitian ascends the throne, before the great persecution, not Nero's persecution, but Domitian's persecution. Before it happens, so God's people will know beforehand, this is what's going to happen, and this is how the church is going to fill the whole earth. But don't make any mistake, Rome is going to fall. And in the image, in the Revelation, Jesus is on the white horse, the victor. We win. You're going to go through the ringer, as my teacher would say. You're about to go through the ringer, but take heart. We win. And whether you live or die, the persecution, you may die for it, but you win because you already have the victory secure if you stay faithful to me. I'm the one that has the words of life, Jesus says. I'm the beginning and the end. And you stick with me. But in the image, he's on a white victor's horse. And he's telling the saints who are crying out under the altar saying, how long, God, are you going to allow this to happen? He says, you just hold on. But in the prophecy of Daniel, when that image comes down, when that stone cut out of the mountain hits the statue on its iron and clay feet and it ruptures it and the whole 4 kingdoms collapse and they blow away. And that stone that crushed Rome and all the 4 kingdoms and blows them away, that stone becomes a mountain and fills the whole earth. That's how the church is going to fill the whole earth. And Jesus tells us beforehand. The saints under the altar are secure, knowing that we win. We made the right choice. We stuck with God. We were faithful until the end. And it's hopeful to us because God said it. Now today, we're looking at Joshua because we're in a time, it's a weekend of memorial. We have monuments everywhere. We put up memorials to remember, and we say never forget. We never want to forget the fallen. We want to remember them. But there's something more important about memorials. And I said, remember when, I put the title. And look at the verse. I'm going to read it again, and then we're going to look at the story. Joshua chapter 4, and starting in verse where Alan picked up for it, verse 21. Right? Whoops, I went too far. I'm in 24. Joshua 4, verse 21. Okay, and he's going to explain this. He said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. The memorial is there so that you would teach your children when they ask. And so, oh, there she is. She's hiding back there. Linda, since we're gonna go through Joshua starting in chapter 1. I'm going to recount the story. Let me give you the theme, right? Remember when. It's a memorial. They're going to cross the Jordan. Joshua's going to command them to take a man from each of the 12 tribes, take a stone from the river as they pass through on dry ground, and then they're going to pile those 12 stones up on the other side of the Jordan. And that's going to be a memorial, a marker. And then he says, now you're going to remember this. So the first thing we're going to see, I'll give this to Linda because she likes to keep track of this, all right, Linda? So the first thing in our lesson is going to be called. We've got to be called. And then the first thing that God does when he calls Joshua is he says, now remember. So you're called, now remember. Now you remember, and now you teach. And then I have a bunch of different words for this next section. It's, for Joshua, it's fight. But that word could be work or serve. Fight, work, or serve. But we're called to remember, teach, fight, work, serve. For what purpose? So we can rest. Okay? Right? Couldn't put a better exclamation point on it than that. All right? So there it is, because sometimes I get distracted, and I wanted to tell this story because it brings together our classes. We're coming, one of our studies, we're starting to get to the end of Genesis, and I wanted to kind of tie this together. And it looks like we're going to not get to Exodus right away, so I want to jump ahead and kind of remind us on this Memorial Weekend. So look at Joshua chapter 1. The first thing you see, and by the way, for those who aren't used to me, if you haven't been here in a while or you're visiting, my name is Tom. Welcome. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version, okay, the ESV. Your Pew Bible is the New American Standard Version, NASB, New American Standard Bible. Okay. They're similar, but the ESV sometimes our words are inverted, but it should be pretty close. So follow along in Joshua chapter 1. I'm not going to read all of this. I already just told you the story, so let me hit some highlights for you. So if you look at right in the beginning, in fact, I have a nice heading. It says, God commissions Joshua. And what does it mean? I'm saying we're called. Now listen, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place, watch this, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. Pretty remarkable. From the wilderness of this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Who is Joshua? Right now, Joshua's God's man, just like Moses was God's man. All right? And he's going to demonstrate that. So he's going to give Joshua favor with all the people, just like he did Moses. And he's going to use the event of crossing the Jordan like Moses did when he crossed the Red Sea. So if you had any doubt about who Moses was, and it's pretty fascinating at the end of this chapter, we'll see when Joshua recounts this. If you read the account, if we were in Exodus and we see after they passed through the Red Sea, what do? they sing the song of Moses. And shortly after that, they're making a calf. It's really stunning, right? It's stunning. But anyway, that's where we are. He says in verse 6, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them." You see that? Verse 6, Joshua is God's man. You shall cause this people. So God does put people. We were talking about this, Jorge, on Wednesday night about God. He calls Joseph. Whoever would have thought this little wise guy kid, his brothers wanted to kill him, throw him in a pit, he becomes the ruler of all Egypt. All right, God's man. Right now, Joshua is God's man. So he commands them, he tells them, get ready. In 3 days we're crossing over. But he's going to send these spies into the land, and he's particularly concerned with Jericho. So in chapter 2 of Joshua, he says he's going to send the 2 spies over there. And I know we're familiar with the story, and they end up at Rahab. She takes them in, but they're known, all right? So for some reason, this is kind of bizarre to me, but Rahab's a prostitute. But she's living in this house, and her house is in the wall of Jericho. And so apparently she's being watched, or whatever comings and goings go on. It's noticed by the officials. I don't know. Jorge, it's just an observation I make. Jorge asks really interesting questions on Wednesday night about what is going on here. Why is God using a prostitute, right? But anyway, she has a household, and look at what she says. Verse 9, and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. All right? I make this argument continually for those who deny the Exodus. And there's so many voices in our world today denying that the Exodus ever happened. Sodom and Gomorrah, these are not made-up stories. These are not fairy tales in the Word of God. These are events, historical events that happen that put the fear of God in people. And I'm doing some pre-marriage counseling right now. And in this, I say, it really bothers me when I hear the wisdom of the ages has taught man that civil society is best with a marriage between a man and a woman. That is no wisdom of man. That does not come by the wisdom of man. That's divine information. And the reason why men used it and nations followed it was because Sodom and Gomorrah, they feared God. That's why that marriage was between a man and a woman. But they quickly degrade, right? It doesn't take long for them to degenerate back into an abomination before God. But it's not wisdom of men, all right? This is divine information. The only thing that makes people good in the world today is divine information. Without it, we're degenerates, okay? I know, sorry, forgive me. Everybody knew. I want you to see that. Everybody knew. Was there anybody on the earth that did not know Egypt was the world superpower and Israel was slaves in there and they came out by God's hand? Nobody back then had any complaint about it. It's only modern people now, the sophisticated idiots that we live with now. So scholars. Verse 10, for we have heard that the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. What you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is the God of heavens above and the God of earth beneath. Can you imagine that? From the mouth of a prostitute. Wisdom. Anyway. So they come and they say, hey, these men came here, but she hid them. You know the story, right? She hid them, and she says, oh no, they went out before the gate closed, and you can go catch up with them if you go now. And so they go pursue them. And then she makes this covenant, this deal with them, all right? Spare we know God is coming. We know what's happening. Spare us. And so she says, protect my family, my parents, my brothers and sisters. And they said, you get them in the house, you put the scarlet cord out there, and you'll be protected. But if they leave the house, they're on their own. So does that sound familiar? Kind of like the Passover? All right? You just stay here. All right? But everybody knows they're coming. All right? So they end up going back and they give the report. And what do they tell Joshua? Oh my goodness, this land is, it really, truly, look at verse 24 of chapter 2. And they said to Joshua, truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands. And also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us. Who would have thought? Right? Who would have thought that they're... So chapter 3 now is they're going to cross over. He says, all right, so get ready. And he tells them how they're going to do this. All right, we're going to remember what God said to Joshua. You meditate on my word, and you follow everything that Moses taught you. You meditate on my word night and day. And so how he arranges the ark to be brought in. He says, you get the Levitical priests. You get the ark the way it's supposed to be. You stand 2,000 cubits back. But you follow them in. And when the ark comes to the Jordan, and when the priests set their feet in the water, that water's going to heap up, and then they're going to stand there when the ark is there, and then you're going to pass through, and he tells them to get the stones, right? And you're going to pass through the Jordan. And it's pretty remarkable if you read the account of, how he heaps up the water, because remember, anybody who's ever seen these ridiculous rantings about how God couldn't have, or it wasn't God that caused the Red Sea to dry up. Some wind came and blew the water out of the way for them. It's just coincidentally, Pharaoh comes in with his armies and it doesn't hold up for them. It's just odd how that happens. You know what? It would be difficult to believe this if we didn't have Jesus. For us. And I say this because Jesus, at some point in your life, if you're going to pursue truth, you have to deal with the physical, historical reality of Jesus and his resurrection. It means something. Jesus claimed to be God in the flesh, and God bore witness with the mighty signs that no human being could do. It's not easy for us mortally to live in a world where, say, this is not possible. I know there's crazy things I dream, I have visions, but it's really bizarre that a man, rose from the dead. But the testimony is here. He did it to demonstrate there is a God. This God can be trusted, and his word is trustworthy and true. So the events that I read and accept this is from God. And it's very, what's the word? Fulfilling. Like he said, it makes us free. It frees us up. All right? So they're going to cross over this Jordan. In verse 5 of chapter 3 says, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And they said, why is God doing these wonders among them? Well, because physically they're going to see. I've mentioned over and over as we've been going through Revelation. In the Revelation, we're seeing a picture, an image that John is given, and there's events taking place, but it's an image. It's a spiritual warfare. It's a spiritual battle that's playing out that I believe the saints in heaven are rejoicing over the victory, but then it's going to play out, but it's not going to play out the way it is in the vision. But it's correlating to the physical that actually happened here. The Exodus and the conquest. That God goes before him. And remember, God says, I'm going to go before you. But then, things happen. And he says, I'm not going. Remember? if I stay with you, I'm going to wipe you all out. Let me just, since I hit on this, let me just give you this. Linda, this is a bonus. You don't have to write this down. Let me go back. I just want to share this with you. I got to get this off my chest. I know we have visitors here today, so you could say, who is that nut that talks like this? Exodus chapter 20. I know there's, Irene, we were talking about this yesterday. We call this apologetics, right? That there claims the Bible makes, and then people try to say, okay, God says he created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. But they can't really be 6 days, because where did all the dinosaurs, where did all the millions of years fit? So if there's no sin and death in the world before Adam and Eve sinned, then you got to stick the dinosaurs in there. And we're taught about dinosaurs and the way archaeologists date everything, that there's all these millions of years. Where do you stick the millions of years in the genealogy when it only goes back 7,000 or 6,500? So how do you reconcile that? I don't have a problem with it, but people want to say, oh, a day is not a day. It really took them millions of years to create all this stuff, because God just wound this up and then evolution took over. When God gives them the Ten Commandments, and we're going to end with this rest, but in Exodus verse 11, he reiterates them, because in the law that he gives them, he says, you're going to have this Sabbath day and you want to keep it holy. But in verse 11, he says, Exodus 20:11, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So are we to celebrate a Sabbath for 1,000,000 years or 1,000 years? Because to God, a day is 1,000 years. You see the foolishness? Okay, I don't know, maybe no, you don't. Okay, well then go over to Exodus 31. All right, I just throw some of these things out at you. I told you, some people have difficulty with me, right? It's like, what I want to do, because we sang the song just prior, time is filled with swift transition. I hate to say this, but it's true. Our neighbors seem to have stopped thinking. They're not using their God-given sense to think and reason things out. They accept what's being told them without question. It's dangerous, in my opinion. All right? And it's not to be for God's people. I had a teacher who once used to say, I met him in New Haven, and he said, Christians, we don't check our brain at the door when we come in here. God asks us to reason with him. Think this through. In Exodus 31, 17 and 18, again, he reiterates, it is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel, that in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And he gave to Moses, when he had finished speaking with him on the Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. So, people want to, I don't even want to get into that, but God says it. He says what he means. He's talking to Joshua, and he's speaking to Joshua in real terms, in real time, in Joshua's life, okay? And he's telling him, this is what you need to do. You need to go in there. You need to remember my word now. You need to teach people my word. And I will bless you in all that you do. And so when they get across the Jordan and they heap up the stones, and that's what he says now, you need to keep this memorial. Now, Jesus says in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it's the exact same, they all record the same words of Jesus. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word shall never pass away. And did you catch that? The sign that God gave them, that I created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and I gave them a Sabbath rest? It's a sign. How do we know? Because we have the word. There are many, as you go through all these events that were happening. We mentioned, where's Alice? We mentioned Wednesday night about Jacob goes back to where he talked to God. And he goes back and God says, yeah, you're going to Egypt. I don't think Jacob was going to go. But God says, you're going. And Joseph's going to close your eyes there. I'm going to bring you there, and then I'm going to bring you out. God's going to do it. So Jesus says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word won't pass away. So we have this testimony. We have this word. And so Joshua recounts this in chapter 24. And it's beautiful because Alan read the psalm for us this morning and basically said the same thing. It referenced the Jordan and the Red Sea. All right? And we've been going through the book of Acts and seeing the history of the church. And the same thing. We see this progression. There are events happening. And we're supposed to, as the student is supposed to say, what does it mean? This is happening. It has to mean something. Okay, so we say, what does this mean? So Joshua gives his farewell address. So he gathers them together, chapter 24. He summons them all together and he says in verse 2, the Lord God of Israel, long ago, your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates. Terah, the father of Abraham and of Nahor, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river, and I led him through all the land of Canaan, and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. And I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Right? Have we been reading this, Ron? We were just going through these events, right? Now Joshua is retelling this. In verse 5 he says, I sent Moses and Aaron. I plagued Egypt with what I did in the midst of it, and afterward I brought you out. Then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. And when they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and made the sea come upon them and cover them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt, and you lived in the wilderness a long time. Verse 8, then I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I gave them into your hand, and you took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. He's recounting their history. This is what happened. But what I want you to see is God called them, and then they had to fight. When they crossed the Jordan, they Gad and half tribe of Manasseh and the other tribe, I can't think of the name right now. But they were given an inheritance on that side of the Jordan, but he said, the men have to go and fight until the rest of Israel gets their inheritance, and then you can come back and take your rest. Okay? But the fight, you have to go through the fight first. Okay? But don't worry, I'm with you. He says, I'll be with you. So he talks about in verse 9, then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose and fought against Israel and sent and invited Balaam, the son of Beyer, to curse you. But I would not listen to Balaam. Indeed, he blessed you, so I delivered you out of his hand. And you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho. And the leaders of Jericho fought against you, and also the Amorites and the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and I gave them into your hand. I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you. The two kings of the Amorites, it was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you the land on which you had not labored, and cities that you had not built, and you dwell in them. You eat fruit of the vineyards and olive orchards that you did not plant. Jesus says, I'll never leave you or forsake you. When one of the disheartening things to Moses was when God says, I'm not going with you. And I was just looking through here. I have that verse. Oh, you know what? Let's so you can see it. Exodus 32. Let me just go back here. God says it better than I do. Exodus 32, 34. He says, Exodus 32, 34. But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you Nevertheless, in the days when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them. Then the Lord sent a plague on the people because they made a calf, that one that Aaron made. Chapter 33, the Lord said to Moses, "Depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt to the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your offspring I will give it. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go up among you, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people." Right, Miriam? Stiff-necked people. Always striving with God. So they were like, oh no. God says, I'm not going with you. I'm going to send my angel, and he'll fight for you, but you got to get in there. You have work to do. Jesus, when he prayed, when he was with his apostles on the night he was betrayed, and he says, I'm going back to the Father. I'm going back to the glory I had before. But I'm going to send my helper. But those who believe on your testimony, my Father and I are going to make our home with you. God gives us his Spirit. He goes with us. This is the spiritual exodus I've been saying that we're reading about in Acts and Revelation. Is God knows us. I told you guys this morning, it always troubles me when somebody says, and I know Janice is hurting right now, and she's scared, but she says things like, maybe God's punishing me. No. Good grief, do we deserve to be punished? We're not going to have eternal life because of any good that we do. We do good because we have eternal life. We really need to get that point, because we don't want to be at a point in our life where we doubt what Jesus tells us. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I mentioned this before. I won't get tired of saying it. If we walk in the light as he is in the light, he's not going to leave us. We are not good. That's not an excuse to do evil. He's given us this call and asked us to remember, and he said, learn from me and then teach others. Our work is our service as we learn ourselves and we teach others. We got the school starting up here. We have classes are going to officially start in January with our first student body. But chapel begins again tomorrow. We'll be here. We still do chapel every day. But when the students come, we'll have full-time students, resident students here in January. It's going to be a joy. But we have to find a way. We're living in really bizarre times for us, for baby boomers. And I am looking at you, Claudia, right? Because we're baby boomers. Such a blessed generation. But yet, now we see evil having its way in the world in a way we haven't. Now, understandably, it's always been there, but now we can see it 24/7, and we can't escape it because it comes and finds us, all right? But we now have work to do. We need to rise up and serve in the Lord's army that we sang about, because the battle is raging. It's a spiritual battle for sure. But if we don't gird ourselves up, if we don't take this in, how are we going to get to the end where he says, well done, my good and faithful servant? We need to find a way. How do we serve the body? How do we build up the body? What is Jesus calling me to do? What has he gifted me to do to serve this body? And so I know sometimes we come here and we hear lessons, and I never thought I'd be here, honestly. Never thought I'd be here, Pam. But it's amazing how You're transformed. I saw your picture, by the way, down in Texas. You're on the wall. And if you will just use the circumstances that you're in and bring God with you into your world. I know we say it all the time, but we're supposed to be the salt and the light. I don't know how that works out for you, but I know if you stay plugged in, Ron, if you plug into the source and we build each other up, then you have a better effect in the world that you live in. Bring Christ to the world. We've inherited such great blessings because we had a generation before us that was pretty responsible about that. Now it's our turn. It's our turn to entrust the next generation, to build up the next generation. This is our testimony. This is our memorial. So as we, again, I said this last week, but as we gather around the table now we partake. And I love the song. We were learning some new songs. We gather on the mountain. I just love it. I think that's one is in our songbook. We shall assemble on the mountain. We have fellowship. Our memorial is the testimony, and because we're a stiff-necked, forgetful people, we need to be reminded that we're part of Jesus' body, and his spirit lives and thrives if we'll let him. If we'll let him have his way with us. If you're not part of the kingdom, I hope that this lesson touches you in a special way. If you haven't made the good confession, we're always ready. We'll rearrange our schedule and do whatever because we, like Q said a few weeks ago, we want to be with the angels singing praises when someone makes the good confession is born again. Just one lost sheep coming to the good shepherd is what God's all about. God has given us a purpose. And when we exercise the purpose and the will of God, we will know joy in a world of distress. We don't have to worry about the revelation and what happened in Rome. I don't think we're going to live through that. We're going to see some wicked times, and some people for sure do. But if we'll do our part, we can preserve the blessings for another generation. So if you're not part of that kingdom or you have concerns, come up as we sing our invitation song. Make your requests known. Thank you for your prayers, and the prayers for our brothers and sisters.